Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a little bit. I'm waiting to see if any more faces pop in. But um, yeah, I think without further ado, we are good to go ahead and do the thing as soon as I remember how to turn the button off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of The Joy of Game Mastering. Thank you for tuning in. We are, as always, going to be covering all the different sorts of pits and hurdles that come inherent with the role of Game Master. And this week's episode, we're going to be talking particularly about convention games. Ken, I'm glad you like the thumbnail. Troy was very proud of his ability to Photoshop my head onto Bob Ross's body. But yeah, we're talking all about convention games, which I think are one of the most important aspects of being a long-term game master. It's something very amazing that you can do to give back to the gaming community. If you plan on attending any conventions, I strongly recommend that you take some time and maybe consider putting in an event or putting in a couple of events. Because it's a great experience as a game master. You really get to go out there and show your craft and tell your stories with people who aren't necessarily from your regular gaming group. And it gives you a chance to sort of branch out to some new players, see how some new people experience your favorite kind of game, and even introduce some people to your favorite game. If you play something like Mutants and Masterminds or the Age system, anything like that, where generally people are like, oh, I just play D&D once a month with my friends. It's a great way to encourage people to step into something a little outside their comfort zone. And it gives you a chance to indoctrinate new people. Jesse wants to attend Dragon Con. It's in his region. Yeah, I want to go to Dragon Con really bad. I heard amazing things about Dragon Con while I was at Gen Con last year from my roommate Ian. He said Dragon Con was awesome. So, how to tackle the problem of convention games? It's sort of a multi-phase step. The first of which being, how many events do you want to run? What type of event do you want to run? And sort of all of the pre-planning phase stuff. I encourage you to go to the convention that you're looking to attend's website and asking, just looking in on what sort of expectations are for game masters. If you submit a certain amount of events, do you get your badge? You get your badge for free? Are there any other sort of benefits? And I would consider building my schedule around that benefit starting off. Ken is driving, so thank you for listening in, Ken. I appreciate it. RTE Studios. I would love to do this at a con, but unfortunately, this GM has no coin. Not even plot armor will work. Yeah, sometimes it could be expensive to go to a convention. I definitely get that. But yeah, this would also be applicable if you are looking to run games at your local game store. Basically, I'm going to walk through how to come up with an event that is considered, that's a one-shot basically for strangers as players, or a friend and some strangers, or generally just a one-and-done scenario to really shine a light on your favorite game system. And I'll be using Mutants Masterminds because that's my favorite game system, and it's the one I run at all my conventions. And I've got Gen Con coming up, and I haven't finished writing my adventures yet, so it'll be fun going in there. But yeah, step one, as always, is to consider how many events you want to run, what time slot you want to run them in. If you know yourself, don't set yourself to put in an 8 a.m. event if you're not going to get up to do it. If you want to get them all done I'll get all of your events that you're running out of the way at the beginning. That's another good idea. I have a friend who runs events at Origins, and he does all of his GMing on Wednesday and Thursday, so he's free to just enjoy Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I like to have a GM event every day, personally, just because I love GMing. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I have had some experiences with GMs at conventions that were not awesome. And it can be a lot of money to go to the convention. It can feel real bad to have your time wasted by a GM who's not 100% prepared or you just don't gel with. So yeah, time slots, what time you want to run them, and then how many events you want to run, and if you want to do unique events for each time slot or if you want to do repeated events. Generally, I recommend for people to do their event at least twice if they're writing a custom event for the convention, just because that gives you a chance, that lessens your workload as you're getting ready for everything, and it gives multiple people a chance to sign up for your event if it sounds awesome. I regret not doing that at Origins this year with my Superman event because a lot of people wanted to sign up for it and I didn't have a lot of slots available. So that was kind of rough. Yeah, that's sort of the pre-planning phase of everything. And we're going to assume we're going to a decent convention that is a Thursday through Sunday convention. So there's 4 days of events: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, 4 days worth of events. Generally, an RPG event runs for 3 to 4 hours. So you have a certain amount of time within those days that you can begin to prepare to run your events. And I like to break my schedule up into chunks of 3 to 4 hours. We're going to go with 4 hours for our example, but basically your day breaks down to an 8 a.m. to a noon slot, a 1 to a 5 p.m. slot, and a 6 to 10 slot. And of course, modulate that as needed if you want to start a little later, if you want to not do anything until the afternoon and then later on into the night. And I like to leave an hour between my spots so that I've got time to eat, I've got time to decompress if I need to, or just to travel from one end of the convention center to the other end of the convention center. And you want to leave time to do fun things like wander around the dealer hall or go shopping, play games if there's anything on the schedule that looks good to you as an event to play. And then I sort of look at the big picture schedule. So those 4 days, those time slots, what times do I want to run events? For this example, I like to run evening events because people are usually pretty excited about them. They've had their dinner, they're ready to get in. So we're going to go with 4 10 p.m. slots. Well, Sunday wouldn't have a 10 p.m. slot. We're going to go with 3 10 p.m. slots and an 8 a.m. slot on Sunday. So one game, one game, one game, and one game. So I've done my pre-planning. We have scheduled out 4 events. We know when we're going to run them at the convention. And that means we are ready to figure out exactly what games we want to run. For this fictitious convention, we're going to run 2 unique scenarios 2 times. So on Thursday, we'll run game 1 first time. Friday, we'll run game 2 first time. Saturday, we'll run game 1 second time. And Sunday, we'll run game 2 second time. And I would recommend not running the same event twice in one day because it'll be a little stale for you as a game master. And you might run into a situation where you're not as excited to run the event again back to back, or with a break, even with a break in the middle, it can be sort of rough getting through the same event twice in one day. Oh, Jesse, the Expanse is a great con game. Ian runs some amazing events for that at different conventions. I know he ran one that was awesome at Origins, and he's trying to run one at Gen Con, but we have to see if the events get approved. We got a little bit of a late head start on our event submissions for Gen Con this year. But my events were approved for consideration to be approved, which I think is the funniest step in the process. But that basically means it's in the batch to be approved with a bunch of other stuff sometime this week is what they said. So my 4 events will be going ahead at Gen Con. So we know what days we're running, we know what times we're running, and we know that we're running 2 games. Now it's the fun part in the pre-process of what kind of game do we want to run? You always start with your system first, what system you want to run. In my case, it's going to be Mutants Masterminds, which means I can run any superhero game I want to run. So I have, and there's a lot of other kinds of games that you can run using M&M as well. I have a backlog of events that I have done over the years, 51 adventures for just for different cons over the years. Actually, if people would be interested in that, I can share that link here in chat if people want to take a look and see what sort of events I've got in my backlog. And feel free to crib from this if you want to use something like this for your events, or if you want to begin this kind of table for yourselves. Just when you're in the Google Sheet, make sure you hit make a copy and you'll be good to go. But yeah, you look at sort of the big picture with the games that you're looking at. The system you're doing is Mutants and Masterminds. So, what sort of stories do I want to tell? What different parts of the superhero genre are appealing to me at the moment? And that's where I sort of dive into. I look at either movies I've seen recently, or TV shows that have come out, or anything that sort of sparks my imagination to get me thinking about this one shot scenario. One shots need to be something that has a solid beginning, middle, and end. And I encourage you to come up with a very simple pitch for this adventure. Something that is a 1 to 2 sentence, like, this is my Justice League adventure where the Justice League gets sent into Mr. Mix's It Pitlick's D&D game and they've got to survive that trial. Or I've got a Gotham City Knights game where the Bat family has to deal with supreme strangeness as the Mad Hatter magically transforms Gotham into his own wonderland. So just something that is really exciting, really thought-provoking, and really encourages people to sign up for your event. I've got or here's an Earth Prime example for my Freedom League All in the Family adventure. All isn't as it seems when Zeus requests the Freedom League's assistance in foiling his brother's latest scheme to take over Earth Prime. We could tell that this is going to be a Greek god family issue, and the Freedom League is going to be the player characters. So you boil down exactly what story you're looking to tell into its most base parts that are easy to sell, easy to trigger excitement for the audience. So for this example, for our fictitious convention, I've been really excited about the X-Men lately. So I want to run an X-Men adventure. And sometimes it could take forever to come up with titles. Like that's one of the hardest parts of writing the story. But you want to have a good title, you want to have a good synopsis. And I like titles that are song lyrics. I like titles that have alliteration. I like titles that give us an idea of sort of what we're dealing with. So I'm going to call this X-Men adventure Pariah. And the synopsis of the adventure is that the X-Men are sent to rescue a new mutant whose abilities are causing havoc in upstate New York. It's very simple. It's very much, this is an X-Men adventure. We know that we're going to be talking to a new mutant, and we don't have to commit to a villain. We don't have to commit to anything other than those basic conceits. And I recommend keeping the synopsis very loose like this. Yes, tongue-in-cheek titles when appropriate. I'm a big fan of that. One of my Gen Con events this year is the Suicide Squad back in the USSR. And it's just the Suicide Squad is defending the Beatles during their first tour of their first tour of the Soviet Union, which never happened in real life. But in this one, a bunch of Adam West's villains are going to protect the Beatles while they go to the Soviet Union, and shenanigans are going to ensue. Jesse says, audience ages and special needs, maybe a trigger-free family session. Yes, a lot of conventions have fields within their event submission where they ask you, is this event for all ages? Is it for 13 plus? Is it for 16 plus? Is it for adults only? And there's usually notes in there that you can give to the event organizers to let them know, hey, I need a certain kind of space. I require an electrical outlet. I need, anything like that. And a lot of them now with the computers, the software that is involved in organizing events gives you the chance to email participants in your adventure as well to let them know, hey, these are sort of maybe some of the triggers that are going to be involved. These are going to be, there might be some plot points, and I will be using safety tools at the table. We'll go over sort of safety tools and stuff when we get to the actual running adventures part of this discussion. Jacob Brown. Any word on Sentinels of Earth Prime expansions? At this time, there's no intent on our end to make any more Sentinels of Earth Prime expansions, but we are certainly interested in it. It's just a matter of figuring out how that works in relation to Sentinels of the Multiverse second edition, and if there's any interest from their home company in producing any more of that. We're open to the idea, but at the moment, there's no time. There's no plans. Yeah, so we have our first event, X-Men Pariah. Of the synopsis, the X-Men are sent to rescue a new mutant whose abilities are causing havoc in upstate New York. That's a pretty straightforward 4-color adventure. So the genre of this one's 4-color superhero adventure. And like I said, we should run this twice so that we only have to write 2 adventures. If you're feeling adventurous and you want to write 4 adventures, I am the last person to tell you no about that. I love writing and running as many events as my friends and family will allow me to. But that gives us 1 adventure. Our second adventure, we have an option here. We can go with something that is, again, something very traditional superhero, or we can branch out a little bit. We can think if we want to do something a little zany, maybe something a little scary, something that's a little bit different genre-wise from the first adventure that we came up with. Does anybody have any thoughts in the chat? Because if left to my own devices, I will go zany and I will come up with something. So this is a Marvel adventure. I should probably do something Earth Prime, would be my thought, because that is the name on the box for Mutants Masterminds. That's our bespoke setting. So looking at our teams that we have, that we can find some interesting things in. Super animals that are mystically powered. You know what, Eric? I have exactly what you're looking for. We have a team in Mutants Masterminds called the Shadow Knights, who are a quartet of sisters who have ninja training and happen to be humanoid rabbits. So we're going to do a Shadow Knights adventure, which is going to be very Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's going to be very much cartoons of the 80s, very zany. There's going to be a lot of shenanigans in here. So the Shadow Knights, we need a title, we need a synopsis. And I need to open the Super Team Handbook because I don't remember all of the Shadow Knights' names off the top of my head. Which would probably be a good thing for me to know just offhand, but so the Shadow Knights, we're going to have them go up against. I think the fun thing with the Shadow Knights and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is when they get put up against a very serious villain, somebody who is not in on the joke of the colorfulness, the zaniness. So I think we're going to have the Shadow Knights go up against Dr. Sin, who is one of the oldest villains in the Earth Prime setting. He is the nemesis of the very first Raven and subsequent Ravens. His granddaughter's Raven 2, and there is a Raven 3 is descendant from an rival ninja assassin agency. So there's a lot of fun interplay there. So Shadow Knights in the shadow of sin. I could see this cover in my mind, just the 4 ninja rabbit girls all like in black and white or in relief up against a T partition. There's ninjas in the background. They're descending on them to fight. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. So, synopsis: the Shadow Knights are, and one important note for synopses is you really want them to be an active voice. You don't want them to be in passive voice. You want you don't want to say this will happen to the characters or the characters will be sent to, because that doesn't that makes it seem like the choice is being taken out of the player's hands. Um, and I know I said this in the X-Men synopsis, but I need to correct myself. Instead of saying are sent to or will deal with, say something like must, or must is a good word to replace any of those because it puts the impetus on the heroes and not on the story to drive things. And we'll go over some of the plotting and stuff for one shots when we get into that process. We're still in the pre-planning phase of convention games at this time. So, synopsis: the Shadow Knights must defeat the villainous Dr. Sin when his organization no. The Shadow Knights must stop the villainous Dr. Sin from enacting his latest scheme on San Francisco. That's the other thing about the Shadow Knights is they are a West Coast team instead of an East Coast team like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So RTE, for my pitch to my players in my HCS2 team, the pitch was simple. The year is 3360. You and your friends are visiting the parks at Worlds of Adventures theme parks in Tokyo. But little do you know this one visit that will change you and your friends forever. Get ready to be our hero and save the day. Heroes Core United Front. Yeah, that's a good synopsis. That's very simple. I'd like a little bit more information about what the characters are. If we're superheroes, I'd like a little bit of that. If we're teenage heroes, I'd like just a little bit more detail about who the PCs are going to be. But yeah, that's very good. That's a very good basis. Stan Brown, how much is that Shadow Knight in the window? Eric, title Timmy stuck in the well of sin. Thank you, Squire. Carlotta, Francesca, Lucille, and Marie. Cliffhanger voice works too. Yes, Cliffhanger voice is great. Basically, the players become heroes and must save the park's guests from another guest who calls himself Grace. It sounds like a fun adventure. I like that a lot. No, I don't want to block that user. I want to. Thank you, Squire. I'm not trying to block you, I promise. Grace is basically the big bad. Awesome. So we have our scenarios, we have our synopses. We are ready to begin the adventure preparation part of things. So, like I said at the beginning, convention games or one shots for local game stores, anything like that, basically have the pre-stage, which is the figuring out what time slot, how many events we want to run, what the rewards are. Then we move on to the outlining phase. We have our adventures. We know how many times we're going to run them, but now we need to begin doing the actual work of getting the adventure ready. This happens generally, I recommend 2 to 3 months before the convention starts, so you have time to play test, you have time to think about your adventure, you have time to really nail things down, because one of the pressures of running a game at a convention or a local game store is that you become the face of that system. You're the person who is representing this game. You are the person who is a part of somebody's vacation or a part of somebody's day off. You are trying to be entertaining. You're trying to make it worth their while to sit down at your table, and that can be a lot of pressure. I find that being prepared helps mitigate the feeling of that pressure, at least for myself. So we have our 2 adventures: X-Men Pariah, Shadow Knights, The Shadow of Sin. So the next thing we have to do is figure out how many players we want to have. And I find that the sweet spot for convention games is generally 4 to 6 players. You can, of course, run more, but most conventions will have fields within the event submission tabs that are what are the minimum amount of players you will take and what are the maximum amount of players to take. I generally always do 4 minimum and 6 maximum, with my own personal understanding that I'm willing to go to 7 if I have somebody who couldn't get into the event and they really, really want to play it, or if I have a friend who's in town who didn't get into event submission, or the event submission system didn't work really well on the day of launch and the system crashed and a bunch of people didn't get to sign up for the events they really wanted to play. I like to leave a little bit of leeway there, but you don't have to do that. But knowing that you want to go with 4 to 6 players means you need to have 4 to 6 characters for your event. RTE Studios, it's probably going to be level 20 adventure. Yeah, nice. It's a D20 system based on the basic principles of 5e. Cool. Yeah, I like 5e. I'm a big Mutants Masterminds person, but that's probably apparent just based on my job or whatever. But so the next thing we need to do is come up with our cast of player characters. That's the most important thing here because those are the people that your players are going to sign up to play. And generally, with a convention game or a friendly one shot, you want to provide pre-gens. You don't want to be dealing with character creation. You don't want to not know what's coming into the table, unless that's the kind of event you're running. If you're running a tutorial event where you're doing half of the time slot is creating characters and the other half of the time slot is a small adventure, that is something that you can do. It's not what I'm going to be talking about today. But a lot of the principles will apply either way. So, our X-Men game, we need X-Men to populate our pre-gens. And we have a tough situation here in that there are a million X-Men that I would want to include as player character options, and there are a million X-Men that people will want to play when they sign up for this event. So it's up to you if you want to go sort of all out and offer a bunch of options, but make the scenario a little less specific to the characters that are there. Or you can have a very set amount of player characters and really give them a lot of opportunities to shine in the story that you're telling. Both are good options. There's nothing wrong either way. It's just up to you what the kind of game you want to run. In this instance, I think, because I know a little bit about what's going to happen later, I think we're going to go sort of all out and just have like 18 X character options to bring to this event. Because X-Men is one of those ones that everybody wants to sign up for. It'll sell out immediately, and people will show up with certain expectations about which characters will be available. Karma and Cypher are the best mutants. They're the only ones we need. That's true. I mean, I like Wolverine a lot, but I like Karma and Cypher too. There's so many good X folks. Let's figure out who we want to bring along. So we have 4 to 6 character players, and I would encourage you, if you're going to include a large number of pre-gens, to route the number in some way to the amount of players that you're going to have. So in this case, I'm going to go with 18 because we have up to 6 players. So that means that's 3 character choices per player, basically. And it's not too much that it's a lot of printing and it's a lot of analysis paralysis at the beginning of the process. But we're going to go with a lot of core mutants, and then we're going to add in some fun ones for us. So we'll start with sort of the baseline X-Men. We're going to go with Beast, Angel, Cyclops, Storm, Jean, Wolverine. And I bet all of you have your own idea of baseline X people. Nightcrawler, we're going to add in. And it might even be, I'll share my screen a little bit. Maybe. Can I share screen? I can. As long as it's not freaking, is it freaking out? No. All right, so going in. Squire, how difficult is to balance the pre-gens in terms of complexity to their abilities and also personalities? Is it hard to not make a pre-gen too much of a star? I find that the easiest way to make sure that you balance pre-gens in terms of complexity and making sure that somebody isn't able to hog the spotlight, especially in Mutants Masterminds terms, is to make sure that they are built on the same playing field. So I prefer PL10 150 points for all of them. But keeping them all the same power level, keeping them all the same power points is going to ensure that everybody is theoretically equal. There are going to be some instances where, especially with personality and especially with players, where there might be some instances of characters who naturally gravitate towards the spotlight or gravitate towards being too much of a problem solver. And that comes up to you as the GM with making sure their abilities are in line with what they can do in the comics, but tailing things back a little bit. Think about how in the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, Superman was rarely the person who could solve all of the problems for everybody. Um, and everybody still felt like they had a role to play on that team. Superman was good at getting hit. He was good at punching strong things, but he wasn't necessarily the person who was going to solve like a technological problem or a speed problem. They would make sure that everybody had some role to play. And if it helps, when you're coming up with your pre-gen list, you can assign them categories. You can assign them sort of basic RPG categories like tank, leader, blaster, striker, utility character, or control like crowd control character. If that helps you make sure wrap your mind around everybody's thoughts about what that character is supposed to do. Oh, Nate Robbins, I'm glad you think so. Eric says Colossus. Of course, I was going to add Colossus. Is Colossus OS or US? It's OS. No, it's US. I'm dumb. English is my job, and I still get that wrong sometimes. But that's okay. So we've got Beast, Angel, Cyclops, Storm, Jean, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Kitty Pryde. I'm going to add Magic because I've already got Magic built, and she has an interesting role on the team. Jubilee, if we're feeling froggy, Rogue, Gambit. So we've got 13 X people in. If we want to go all the way to 18, we need 5 more. 14 to, yeah. Math, I'm not good at math or English, but here I am. Who's got favorite X people out there? Iceman. Yep. Yeah, City of Hero archetypes. If you played City of Heroes growing up, is a great place to begin looking at sort of how you determine who does what on the team. And some of it will be natural. Some of it is you can easily tell this character is for blasting people. This character is for taking big hits. This character is supposed to be in melee, scratching dudes up. Beast, Angel, Cyclops, Storm, Jean, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Kitty Pryde, Magic, Jubilee, Rogue, Gambit, Iceman. Rachel Summers. Karma, Cypher, Sunspot, Cannonball. Warpath. Wow. See, I'm telling you, everybody's got favorite X people. Wolfsbane. Rebel Moose, do you have some more obscure characters built? I think there's also some official, unofficial Marvel stuff. There is unofficial Marvel stuff. If you head over to Echoes of the Multiverse, I think is where a lot of those builds wound up. I'm a big fan of Batgirl 3's builds, Jab's builds over at the J-Mart. I was thinking about Wolverine X-23 as a character. But I do have a lot of I have more obscure DC characters built than I do Marvel characters, but I do have a decent amount of Marvel characters built at this point. Blob was in the X-Men for half an issue. Yeah, but you see how it's easy to get into all of these characters. I like Sunspot a lot. We're going to throw Sunspot in, Karma, and Cypher, thanks to suggestion there. And I think we will throw Emma Frost in as well. Professor X is an interesting choice. I would generally see Professor X as an NPC, but if you were running something that was set in sort of like the First Class, especially the movies universe, you could definitely have Charles as a player character, no questions asked. But for this specific event, I am imagining in my mind that Charles is sending the team to solve a problem and he's not present at. So we have our 18 characters, and we could have many, many, many more X people. And now we look at our list. We look at our synopsis, which is they must rescue a new mutant whose abilities are causing havoc in upstate New York. And we look at our list of player characters, and With a wider list like this, we do a little bit less of what I would call adventure tailoring to these characters, because we want to make sure that no character is essential for the plot that we're telling. We don't have a load bearing PC that needs to be played. There are characters who will make life easier for the task at hand, which is calming a new mutant whose powers are causing havoc. So, Rogue would be very helpful. Jean and Emma Frost would be very helpful because they have the ability to either nullify powers or calm somebody from a distance. So these are characters that could be problematic for our story. Not problematic, but they could lessen some of the difficulty that we're looking at. Magic is similar. She has the ability to teleport people a lot of places. I'd say Kitty Pryde is also somebody who can make just adventure design a little more difficult. Nightcrawler also. So these are characters that can make the adventure that we're going to build a little more difficult. So just keep that in mind when you're building your scenes. What sort of powers are you playing with here? And if players show up, like if this is the full one, two, three, four, five, six, if all six of your players find these characters as their favorites and this is who the party is, what does your adventure look like if that's what happens? Yeah, Storm and Scott Summers are leaders. Alpha Flight. Thunderbird gets my vote. Okay. Mirage, Dazzler, Nightcrawler. Gambit, Morph, and Bishop were my favorite from the animated series. I'm really excited for the new animated series. Alpha Flight. Recently went back and watched it, and Morph had the best one-liners. Yeah, so now we begin looking at what roles these characters play in the team. So, and it doesn't have to be the City of Heroes list of archetypes. It's one thing that I do sort of at the base level to sort of get my mind around it. But Beast is a utility character because he has the invention abilities, and a striker because he's good at rolling around and punching a bunch of minions acrobatically. Angel is generally a utility character because he can fly. He has the ability to keep people at bay from a distance. Cyclops is a leader and a blaster. Storm is a leader and utility. Or I wouldn't say utility. I'd say crowd control for Storm because her environmental effects can wreak havoc on everybody. Jean is kind of a blaster, kind of a crowd control. She's a blaster in that she has some abilities that can affect defenses that are not just toughness, and that can make her a really good plug and play character when you go up against particularly tough opponents like the Blob or Juggernaut or Fin Fang Foom if you're feeling frisky. Wolverine is the quintessential striker. He's good at getting in, blasting people. He does have a little bit of tank-ishness in that he can keep going. He doesn't go down. Ken fam, I got to head out, but I'm definitely going to check out the VOD later. Well, I'm very glad, Ken. Thank you, and I hope the VOD is good for you. But Nightcrawler is a utility character and a little bit of a striker. He can get in and out, slice people up with that sword, or fly around Alan Cummings style and kick a bunch of dudes in the White House. Colossus is a tank. Kitty is a big utility character. She has a lot of skills. She has a lot of movement abilities, a lot of things that make skill challenges and other things like that much easier rather than combat. Same with magic. Very big utility. Also, some magic expertise, which is something that I would call out. She's one of the only characters on this list that has magic expertise, so I wouldn't want to build anything in the scenario that relies on magical knowledge, but I would want to come up with a scene that can benefit from having magical knowledge, if that makes sense. And then, of course, she's got that big old soul sword. She's good at striking. Jubilee is a blaster. Rogue, you can build Rogue a lot of different ways. My preferred Rogue is the Miss Marvel Rogue, so I would consider her to be a tank slash utility because she does also have the energy absorption abilities. And again, assume these are all PL10 150 PowerPoint versions of these characters. So when you're building a character that is narrowed down to 150 PowerPoints, you really want to get the heart of what makes this character awesome. Um, and not necessarily worry too much about representing them at the iconic level, but making sure they feel the way they're supposed to feel when they play and they have a role to play on the team. It's a lot of trial and error when you're making characters that way. And if that's something that's of interest to people, we could have a discussion about how to build characters in Mutants and Masterminds to that level to get them down to 150 PowerPoints while still feeling like they're iconic versions. Gambit is another skilled character slash striker. He's more of a blaster. He can hit people with the stick, but throwing the cards is one of the things. And that whole molecular acceleration ability has some pretty interesting power stunt capabilities. But this is sort of the high level categorization for the characters. Iceman, I would consider to be a blaster. Sunspot, I would consider to be a blaster. Karma is a fun utility character. Cypher is another fun utility character. And then Emma Frost, much like Jean, is blaster, crowd control. But I would argue she would also have some leadership abilities. So we have our high level categorization for our 18 PCs. But yeah, looking at all the fun things. So with this high level categorization done, I would then go into outlining the background of the story in this exciting issue of the story. If you'll reference our adventure design discussion a few weeks back. As a matter of fact, I'll just pull one of those up now so we can sort of all follow along. I did share this adventure outline on the Patreon. So if you're in the Mutants and Masterminds Patreon, please feel free to take a look and follow along. And I want to share a different window now. I thought it would do the same window since I opened another Microsoft Word document, but that's okay. So in our adventure notes, we have our PCs. So this would be protagonists instead of antagonists. And we'll just go ahead and pop in X-Men Pariah adventure notes. If I was smart, I'd be doing this for one of the adventures I have to run at Gen Con. But you know what? Sometimes I'm not the smartest. And that's okay. Synopsis. The X-Men. Oh. Just keep the text. The X-Men must rescue a new mutant whose abilities are causing havoc in upstate New York. And then for our protagonists, we have these 18 characters. Oh no, whoops. That's okay. So these are our protagonists, these are their roles, and then we could start thinking about who the villain is going to be. I think for this particular instance, with the X-Men, you have a whole range of characters to choose from. It's a little overwhelming when you're sitting down to write a scenario with these characters. But you start thinking about, from your synopsis, it's a new mutant whose abilities are causing havoc. Who would be interested in that? What benefit would that provide a villain? Is this something that's going to be of interest to Magneto and the Brotherhood because it's a new mutant who might be able to be brought into the fold for them? Is it something Mr. Sinister might be behind? Maybe the new mutant is a Mr. Sinister creation. Could it be related to the Brood in some weird maniacal way? There's a lot of different fun options we could sort of explore. Oh, there we go. Now the screen share should be on. Thanks, Word Maximus. Sorry about that. You just missed me copy pasting some things, so no worries. Nate Robbins loved the mutants. Yeah, I love the mutants too. There's so many good mutants. But yeah, so when we're thinking about this adventure, we know that the objective is to help a new mutant. And in this instance, I think we're going to go with something a little off the beaten path. Magneto and the Brotherhood are going to be the first antagonist. They're going to be sort of the stars of the first portion of the adventure, and then we're going to transfer into something a little bit different. So we're going to start antagonists with Magneto and the Brotherhood, and we'll want to pick a couple Brotherhood members as his backup. We'll go with the traditional Mystique, Toad, Blob, Pyro. Yeah, we're looking at 6 player characters, so we probably want Magneto to have 5 people backing him up. Juggernaut's the first thing that springs to my mind, but is there another Brotherhood member that we could chuck in? That could be fun. Maybe Avalanche. Avalanche could be fun. Yeah, I think Avalanche is the other one we want to check in. Yeah, Eric said Avalanche. Cool. So that's going to be the antagonist basically of the first half of this adventure. In the second half of the adventure, we're going to figure out that the new mutant, the ability that he has is. Okay. I think the new mutant that we're dealing with, and you have the choice if you want to, you can make this a canon character, you can make this a new character. Whatever you feel most comfortable with. If you're feeling inspired to create something that feels like it belongs in the world, please feel free to do that. Nobody's going to be upset if they show up and they're facing off against a new creation of yours with their favorite heroes. Some of them will like it because they will not know what to expect. Some of them might not like it because they're like, well, I wanted to show up and fight the Brotherhood, but you're the GM, you're in the driver's seat, you know what is best for you and your process. So please listen to yourself when it comes to that. But the new mutant, who I am calling Pariah, you notice that's a fun play here with the title of the adventure being the name of the mutant, who's, yeah, I'm not as clever as I think I am, but sometimes. So I think he's called Pariah because this mutant has an ability that is uncontrolled at the moment, but he has the ability to make people disappear. And I think that's the havoc. I think every and he's called pariah because he's by himself. He's isolated due to the manifestation of his uncontrolled powers. So Pariah is not the antagonist of this story because Pariah is as much a victim of what's going on as the people who are being made to disappear. And he's afraid. He's not looking to fight the X-Men. He is looking for somebody to help him deal with his problem. Um, so antagonists, Magneto and the Brotherhood, and whoever in my mind, the people who are disappearing are not turning invisible. They're not being disintegrated. They are being sent somewhere else. And when somebody's being sent somewhere else, like I think I'm thinking dimensionally. I think it's dimensional teleport. I think we can either go with Mephisto, and he's teleporting people into limbo, and his ability is similar to Magic's to sort of travel in and out of limbo, or it's another extra dimensional being. And I've got Dormammu on the brain because of last night's Freedom Be Dark in the Multiverse of the Master Mage. So, what if Dormammu was the second antagonist? And we find out that this new mutant's ability is to send people into the dark dimension, similar to how Magic can send herself into limbo. Beyonder. Beyonder feels like maybe a high level villain for this. Could be fun though. Does Beyonder have his own dimension that he's a ruler of? Reality warping, nigh omnipotence. Yeah, it's dating Dazzler. That's wow. I guess Disco's not dead. Yeah, the Beyonder does have his own universe, so it could be the Beyonder if that's how we want to play things. It's going to change the nature of the dimension that we're traveling into, but this is the best part of the adventure creation process for me is really when you're sitting there and you're thinking about all the possibilities because comic books are just such an interesting and diverse genre of storytelling that anything can happen really. Um, Beyonder does feel more X-Men than Dormammu. I know Dormammu is huge with the sorcerers, which is another reason that I'm big on him, is because I love magical superheroes. But having this new mutant putting people into the universe that Beyonder hails from can really be that's a next level story, and I think people will really enjoy it. So the next thing to think about, as always, is the backstory of the adventure. This is the 3 to 5 paragraphs about what happened before the heroes got involved. So in this instance, it would be talking about what happened when or who the mutant is, what happened when their powers manifested, what if anyone, what if anything has happened since the manifestation of the powers, i.e., has there been a government response? Have people fled the immediate area? Um, has there been an attack by sentinels? All that sort of stuff. Just anything that happens prior to the player characters showing up. This backstory is going to tell you about the characters involved, specifically the antagonist, and in this case, the new mutant whose powers have manifested. We'll need to come up with a name for them, or we're going to go with pariah, but we need to come up with a civilian name for them, how old they are, what their life situation was like before this happened. And like a lot of mutants, I think I'm going to go with somebody in the suburbs from a wealthy slash upper middle class family who has been uh, who's been dealing with some form of stress that activated the powers that exacerbated the situation. And I like the idea of this person feeling very alone in their normal life until the powers manifest and they've suddenly become the center of attention for like Shield and Sword and all a bunch of different organizations who are like, we need to figure out where these people are going and how to make this stop happening. So the cornfield, yes, there's always a good cornfield. Oh, you mean like the children of the corn? Could be. There is no reason that we can't turn this into a horror scenario. And people who like superhero games will sit down and they know that the superhero genre is so wide open and available to interpretation that they might not even dislike opening up into a horror scenario with the X-Men. I feel like every Brood story is a horror story at its center. um so who the mutant is, what happened when their powers manifested, what if anything has happened since the manifestation of the powers, uh where the story takes place. So, like I said, somewhere in the suburbs, you know, somewhere middle America, maybe. If we're feeling cheeky, we could put it in Indiana, make it a Stranger Things X Men crossover. But yeah, that would be funny if they went to Hawkins, Indiana, and the place the mutant was teleporting people was the Upside Down. That could be a fun curveball. But then you might not have people who know Stranger Things just because they signed up for an X Men game. So that's the kind of curveball that you want to front load. I think is exciting as the twist is. You want to make sure that the people who signed up for the event are in on the joke, or they're going to be a little lost or a little frustrated that they don't know about Stranger Things and they thought they were getting an X Men story. So that is always something to consider. Iowa for the cornfields. The Brood are terrifying. Oh, I don't think I've seen the Twilight Zone movie. David Bullock, I'm sorry to say. I've seen several episodes of the Twilight Zone, and I really want to watch the Jordan Peele led one that came out recently, but I am not a Twilight Zone expert by any stretch of the imagination. I do love the one where the guy makes a deal with the devil to be immortal, and then decides he wants to push his wife out the window to see what the electric chair feels like, and they give him life in prison. But yeah, they're great stories. I love all the Twilight Zone stories I've seen. I just haven't sat down to watch all of them. So, a suburb in Iowa. Would it surprise you to know I've only heard of Des Moines, Iowa? But we'll pick a town or we'll make up a small town. Traditional small town, cornfields, cul-de-sacs, the whole 9 yards, the very quintessential Americana. And mixing this with Pariah making everybody disappear in his local area, I think there's some fun flavor text in there where you could describe how there was an ice cream truck parked out front and a bunch of kids had run up to go and get ice cream when they all disappeared, and the truck is still there and the music has been spinning but nobody is home. A lot of empty cars and empty barbershops and restaurants with the food rotted away. There's a lot of interesting dynamics that you can play with from a flavor text perspective with this kind of setting. What the antagonists are up to. So that's the other thing you need to consider about here in the backstory portion. In this instance, why is Magneto here? What does he want? How does the Beyonder feel about a potential new rival? What are either of them doing to stop Pariah? And that gives you your backstory. And a lot of this is going to be very specific to you when you're coming with your own adventure. But these are the questions you want to ask. A lot of who, why, what, when, where kinds of questions as you're coming up with the backstory. And I do advise to keep things between 3 and 5 paragraphs so that it isn't a lot of writing, but it is enough for you to understand the antagonist's motivation, what the antagonist is willing to pay to accomplish their goal, and what the antagonist wants to pay to accomplish their goal. Want and are willing to can be very different parameters as you're coming up with your antagonist's plan. What they want to pay is basically what would they do if the heroes never intervened? What is the least amount that they are willing to give up to accomplish this goal? What they're willing to do is what they're willing to sacrifice. Are they willing to die to accomplish this plan? Are they willing to destroy the planet to accomplish this plan? Do they want to, how dedicated are they to this cause? And when you know those 3 things, you can very easily react to what your players do when the game starts. The backstory bits here are your opportunity to set the stage for the game that's going to be played. Because when you're playing a convention game, you are sort of at the whims of people you don't know. And you want to make sure you are in the best position possible to tell your story. Use the Landis City. Oh, I'm on a 75-inch TV in HD. I should have washed my face. Speaking of Twilight Zone and Pariah making people disappear, there was finally Time episode with the guy who just wanted to read. Yeah, I did. I've seen that episode. Yeah, there's just so many good Twilight Zone episodes, and I haven't started the new Black Mirror yet, but I really enjoy Black Mirror as well. And my wife and I are watching. We have a Shudder subscription, so we're watching the new season of Slasher right now, the Ripper season, and it's really good. There's too much good TV in the universe to watch. Okay, so that's the backstory. The other thing to give you the best chance as you're running your game at the convention is to come up with a really good in this exciting issue section. generally with a 4-hour adventure slot. And I would recommend going with 4 hours for a convention game just because that gives you enough time and space to tell a pretty cohesive story that has a beginning, middle, and end while giving you a chance to take a break in the middle if people need to get up and go to the bathroom. I try to write an intermission in, so I tend to think of my adventures in acts or comic book arcs. So the first hour of the adventure is the first comic book in the story. The second hour of the adventure is the second comic book in the story. The third hour is the third comic book, and the fourth hour is the climactic finish to that little arc of stories. I like each hour to have its own identity, to have its own sort of mini conflict that needs to be resolved, but that's all. It's up to you how you want to pace things out. I try to leave a 5 to 10 minute break in between hour 2 and hour 3 so people can refill their water. They can go to the bathroom if they need to check a text message, they need to grab a snack, whatever they need to do. I found that 2 hours is generally good for people's attention span. And there might be people who get up and walk away to go to the bathroom in the middle of the game. That's fine. Um, Although most of the time when that happens, they walk away to go to the bathroom and then they come back when it's time to go to break. So um, just be mindful of your players. As someone who is very nearsighted, that Finally Time episode of Twilight Zone scared me. Yeah, I believe I too am very nearsighted. Well, I'm very nearsighted in one eye and I'm very farsighted in the other eye. It's real bad. I was 2 years old when I got my first pair of glasses. And I learned how to walk by bumping into walls and listening to my parents laugh at me. So it was awesome for my self-esteem. But yeah, in this exciting issue, this is a paragraph breakdown of each hour of the adventure. This is you having sort of a high view of the story, a macro view of the story. This is the first paragraph is your first hour. It includes whatever introduction scene you want to do, whatever bit of role playing and preparation for the adventure the characters get to do before they set off and they meet the central conflict. The second hour should introduce the entire central conflict. So we have made it to Iowa. We have learned that people are missing and we are trying to find Pariah. In my mind, this story sort of advances this way. I'm going to type this up here. So, paragraph 1. And this is the kind of story that there are multiple beginnings to scenes, to stories, and we'll sort of go over that in a minute. But in this story, paragraph 1 concerns the X-Men, at Xavier's school and potential small roleplay scenes for them. With a cast of 18 potential characters, I would come up with probably 4 little vignettes that can happen in this first scene that happen at the school. So this is a little chance for everybody to introduce their character, to do a little bit of role playing, maybe make one roll and really sort of set the mood for the story. For this instance, it would be all of them at Xavier's school doing something related to their function at the school. So maybe one of the vignettes is a number of characters giving a special assembly for a group of students about a topic. Some of the X-Men could be chaperones during cafeteria time. Some of the X-Men may be working in the danger room with a couple of new students, giving them some pointers on tactics and things like that. I wouldn't make that a full fight. Like, don't roll initiative, don't ask for rolls, just make it narrative. And the fourth vignette could be the characters who are being assembled by Charles to learn about the mission and to gather everybody up. So those small role-playing scenes, and then Charles's request of the X-Men to go find Pariah. And then how long their journey is on the Blackbird. And any potential lines of investigation they can pursue in this first hour, this first portion of the story. On their journey to the Blackbird, they may be able to access secret files that the Blackbird has backdoors into Shield or various different mean databases and things like that. They can reach out to their contacts to see what they've heard. They can check in on what Magneto's, if like any of the Brotherhood are in prison, if there's been any sightings, if the Sentinels have been involved. Just give them the chance to roleplay with each other and to ask questions of you and to prepare for the adventure at hand. Paragraph 2 in this instance concerns the X-Men's arrival in Iowa. So moving through the town, or any challenges they face moving through the town. If there is a government quarantine, are they able to pass through without trouble? Are they able to pass through because they're X-Men? Or do they have to get permission? Do they have to get permission or sneak through? Those are all questions you should be asking as you're building these scenes. And then encountering Pariah, and I would end this paragraph with the Brotherhood arriving to try and recruit Pariah. Encountering Pariah as the Brotherhood are attempting to recruit him. And then that leads to a fight between the Brotherhood and the X-Men. So, big fight. My advice when you are planning convention games is to plan for 2, maybe 3 fights total. You'd be surprised how much time a single combat takes up during a story-driven arc. And you want to leave room for role playing. You don't want to run overtime. You want to be respectful of the 4-hour time slot because they might have another event right after your event. I like to end things like 10 minutes early if I can, but it really depends on how long combats take, how much role playing takes, and if there's any analysis paralysis. You really want to make sure things move. Lunchtime, cheating on a test. Yeah, things like that. Splitting each session into a 3-act structure. Yes, that's a very great idea. Hey, Jonesy, how's it going? We're talking all about convention adventures and things like that. Yeah, we take the X-Men here. I'd also consider at the end of paragraph 2 Pariah's abilities manifest as a result of stress during the fight and teleport everybody into the Beyonders dimension. I love, especially with an intermission in the middle, I love a cliffhanger ending because it guarantees generally that people will come back for the second half of the adventure. I haven't had many experiences of people not coming back for the second half of an adventure, but it has happened to people I know, and it has happened as a result of forces outside of the game. But generally, you want to make sure that there's something exciting that happens at the end that keeps their juices flowing during the break and they don't lose momentum. Because at the end of the day, one of the chief jobs as a game master is to control the momentum of the story. You're setting the pace, you're setting the energy. If you keep your energy and your focus, your players will zero in on that and they will feed on that, and they will know sort of, this is an intense moment, I need to pay attention, or this is this is silly, or this is a conversation between these characters, I can step back a little bit. They look to you for a lot of their decision making when it comes to how much investment I should have, all that good stuff. Jonesy always goes with 4 scene structure, 1 RP, 1 skill, 1 combat, and 1 flex. I assume one flex is one random kind of scene and not just one scene where you flex on the players because you're a great GM. We had a person in our party get arrested at the intermission for peddling drugs. Yeah, it can happen. Um, if they don't come back, at least you have a narrative reason their character disappeared. Yeah, it's fun to build in little things like that as safe zones. But you're going to do great. You don't have to worry about your players not coming back after intermission. All of you are armed and able to do the great GM work that you have to. Paragraph 3, we're going to open this scene with everybody in the Beyonders dimension. And if you are feeling frisky, you can have the Brotherhood interspersed with them. I would come up with 3 or 4 locations that the heroes are separated into. Maybe not 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3. 2 or 3 locations that the heroes have been dispersed to, and give them a random Brotherhood member as part of their little party now that they're split up. 1 or 2 Brotherhood members. And if you want to, in order to mitigate sort of the party's split, now it's my turn, now it's your turn, you can ask the other players if they're willing to play those Brotherhood NPCs during this part of the story, as the Brotherhood and the X-Men now have to figure out what the hell happened and if they can get back from the Beyonders dimension. So paragraph 3 is lost in the Beyonders dimension. And this I would handle a lot more as a skill challenge than as a combat. And I would come up with a couple of different interesting vignettes and locations and little stories here, or little difficulties that they have to overcome. And I would have them come across people who have been sent here by Pariah. And, it's up to you. Have these people, how long ago did the manifestations happen? And is time the same here in the Beyonders dimension? Did that group of kids who were sent here with the ice cream truck, are they all adults now? Is Pariah's mom and dad, are they old people? There's a lot of fun, interesting play you can do with dimensional travel that way. But make sure everybody's comfortable with it, because some people will not be comfortable with the notion that, okay, all these kids are old now and they've missed out on their childhood. Hey, Kazuki Press, how are you? David Bodie is my friend. I love David Bodie. I had a GM forget about their convention game after the break, and we just kind of hung out until they randomly came back an hour later. That's amazing. Everybody's human. I mean, that would be a frustrating experience, but there's definitely, I have had some doozies of experiences. So Lost in the Beyonders Dimension skill challenge, 2 to 3 vignettes with their own challenges to overcome. And those challenges can build the wider skill challenge if you don't want to do sort of the separated feeling. Like the role playing will have to be separate, but you could put everybody on an initiative order and you could have them roll their skill checks despite them being separated across the dimension. You can make sure that the whole thing is treated as one turn order, basically. And it's up to you to say, this is what's happening over here, this is what's happening over here, and keeping things, spinning, basically spinning those plates. I have found that most players are willing to sit there for like 10 to 15 minutes before they start getting a little antsy. So I try to make sure I never give any one player more than 5 minutes of individual attention. But you'll get a barometer for that as you continue practicing. And you'll probably find that you make a lot of really good friends at conventions. They'll start off as strangers, but as you go back to that convention and run more events, people will remember you. They'll write down your name. They'll look for your adventures specifically, and you'll start to see repeat people, and you'll start to have that sort of wonderful community building experience. It's a great thing. But yeah, paragraph 3 is the vignettes, the skill challenge, and paragraph 4 is a final confrontation between probably not the Beyonder, but whoever is in charge of protecting the gate that leads between this dimension and that dimension. And finding a way, there's probably a fight here, but finding a way back to the dimension and being able to control Pariah's ability and head back to the X Mansion. Maybe there's an audience with the Beyonder who who, and he tests the heroes in some way to see if they are worthy for the information. Worthy of the ability to contain Pariah's power, and the journey home. This can be a gladiatorial contest. This can be a fight with one of the Beyonder's lieutenants. This can be anything that really is one big climactic scene. But this adventure is not about fighting. This adventure is about the X-Men reaching out to a young mutant who needs help. And you don't want to end the adventure with this big fight, but you do want to make sure they have to earn the chance to go back to talk to Pariah and nullify his powers and convince him to come back to the X Mansion to learn how to handle everything, to learn how to control his abilities and all that fun stuff. So this is one of those adventures that has a big role playing climax. So you want to make sure that there's a little bit of time to get to there. And you can handle that with roles, you can handle that just with discussion. But you want to make sure it leads to that fantasy of we're the X-Men and we're here to help people who need help. Kaizuku Press, we're great. Trying to push M&M in Italy. Just sort of core and power profiles. Thank you so much. I'm pretty sure this is my friend Emmanuel. But I'm glad you're having success. We our reprints books are coming in soon. They should be. I know they'll be here for Gen Con, and I'm pretty sure we'll be fulfilling orders within a week or two. So keep an eye out here for that. But if you ordered the Deluxe Heroes Guide, the Power Profiles, and Gadget Guides, you'll be able to get your copy very soon. Okay, so that's it in this exciting issue. Then we have our backstory, fun stuff, and then we go through and we build those scenes. It's 4 scenes, 4 or 5 scenes, depending on how you break them up. We're not going to do that today because I feel like we're going to dedicate a Joy of Game Mastering video to each type of scene. We did combat last week, but we'll probably look into skill challenges and role-playing scenes and investigation scenes on their own in their own separate videos. But take the information you learned there and apply it to this outline as you're working through. So that's one adventure down. We'll go through, we'll build the pre-gens, we'll fill out the scenes, and the next thing I would advise doing once you have all of that settled and in its place is running a playtest with people that you know and trust. This is a chance for you to try the adventure out in a safer place than with strangers. So if you have a regular gaming group, you can ask them, hey, is it okay if we do my X-Men one-shot instead of our regularly scheduled programming? And make sure that they take notes, ask them if they're willing to provide constructive feedback, and be willing to accept that feedback and make changes if you have to. I have often found that no matter how much planning I do, an adventure will almost always go very differently than I intended it for it to go. Players have an interesting way of approaching problems that maybe you didn't think about, or they point out a flaw in your plot that can be game breaking. And you want to make sure that you can do that in a place with people that you know and who know you well enough to know that, okay, I needed to think about this idea a little bit more. I needed to bake this a little bit better. And to make sure it runs in 4 hours. I have a habit of overwriting. I will freely admit that. And generally, I have the luxury of running an ongoing campaign every week. So if I overwrite, and we can just do that additional material next week. But in a one-shot scenario, you have to be able to do it in this one time slot because you can't guarantee you'll get the same players back for a second time slot at a convention. You might be able to guarantee it when you're working at a friendly local game store, but don't bank on that. Make sure you have your timing down and you are able to move that pace along as need be. So playtest, get the feedback, implement feedback if you have to, and then you're prepared. You are as prepared. You're basically the minimum amount of prepared to run this adventure. It's up to you if there's additional things that you'd like to do in the form of Emmanuel from Italy. Nice. Yep. Alex will finally own all the books. Yes, I will finally own all the books. I need to get Power Profile and Gadget Guide. They seem. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, we'll have to make sure you get that. Yes, like taking the Darkhold to the crossroads. Yeah, look, I had a plan last night. It did not go the way I expected it to. My players surprised me, even though I've been running a game for them for like 4 years now at this point. They always find ways to surprise you. Warren Maximus says, when you play test, pay attention to time and add extra time to the con for people who are not as familiar with the rules. Yes, that is a great idea. You will generally have to provide some sort of, especially if you're running something uncommon, something that doesn't get the attention of like D&D or Pathfinder. You'll have to give a little brief description of what the game is and how it works. I have one for Mutants and Masterminds that I do. I use Hero Lab for my character sheet, so I have a Hero Lab character sheet, and I go over what each zone of the character sheet is. The top is your priors and particulars, your height, weight, physical attributes. Underneath that are your abilities, which are the building blocks of the character. Strength is how big a tomato you can pick up. Stamina is how poisonous a tomato you can eat. Agility is how quickly you can pick up a tomato. Dexterity is how accurately you can throw a tomato. Fighting is how well you can smash a tomato into somebody's face. Intellect is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Awareness is knowing not to put a tomato in a fruit salad. And presence is being able to sell a tomato-based fruit salad as salsa or ketchup. So I go through that. Underneath your abilities are your offenses, which are your various means to maim or harm other living beings. There will be a power name, and then a plus number, and then a DC. We'll go over all of that when we get into combat. In the top right corner of your character sheet are your dodge and parry, which function as your armor class, basically, in terms of D&D. Dodge is for ranged attacks, parry is for melee attacks. If I'm rolling to hit you, add 10 to the number in the window, but if I ask you to make a save, roll a d20 and add that number. Fortitude is to resist things like poison and disease. Toughness is what you roll anytime you suffer a regular attack, and will is to recover against things against mind control, fear, all that fun stuff. Under your offenses are your powers, which are your various amazing abilities. You'll notice that they have a name, and then after the name, there's an effect. That effect word is what effect that power has in the world, and you can flavor it sort of however you want. Effects are things like damage, affliction, flight, movement, protection, anything like that. Also, anything that affects your numbers across the rest of the sheet is generally already factored in, unless you're something like a shape changer or a size changer, in which case you have additional sheets for your various forms and your different sizes. Under your powers are your advantages, which are things that aren't quite as awesome as superpowers. They're things that regular people can accomplish, like statuses, combat maneuvers, wealth, connections, anything that can make your life as a hero easier but isn't as awesome as a superpower. On the back page are your skills listed in alphabetical order. I'll ask you to make a kind of skill check, and you roll the number in the box with the plus beside it. And you also have your complications back here, which are anything that make your life more difficult as a hero. These could be personality flaws, weaknesses, relationships, anything that makes your life as a superhero more difficult. And when that happens, you get what's called a hero point. And then I'll pass out hero points, and I'll explain what hero points do. It's a general rundown of the whole system, but it doesn't have to take everything. You don't have to explain everything. Just make sure, and also tell them, if you want to do something cool, ask me what you want to do, and I'll do the math on my end, and I'll explain how it happens. I'll make it work, because I want to have a cool story as much as you do. Emmanuel asks, Alex, what's the power you would never allow in your scenario or campaign? There's very few powers I will never allow. But I do ask that players have some experience with the M&M system before I allow characters to take variable or summon as a power. Summon I'm very leery of, because summon adds additional turns in turn order for combat. So, and you can do a lot of what you want to do with summon with other effects. Like if you want to summon a swarm of bees to attack somebody, you don't need a stat block for that. That's just burst area damage. If you want to summon a ghost that can move things, you can do that as a move object and flavor it that way. You very rarely need a second character in the initiative to make that happen. So that's the only reason I'm a little leery of summon, is because it could bog things down and make other people wait longer between their actions, which never feels good. Variable, I'm just leery of because it requires knowledge of how the point buy system works and being able to do that quickly. I always advise people who take variable to have a list of powers that they can, basically a list of configurations for their variable, so they have pre-built options that they like to do. Yeah, Eric likes to avoid those powers even with experience. Yeah, they can be a little overwhelming, especially for a GM who might not necessarily know as well as the players do. And I'm a big fan, as always, of a good session zero document where we talk about what the expectations are for things like time travel and dimensional travel and post-cognition and precognition, all that fun stuff. Hello, Learn Music. I hope you're having a good night. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about convention games. I got a little bit off on the sidetrack, but so just reiterating again, your first step when you're signing up for a convention to run events is to determine how many events you want to run and what time you want to run them, how many players you want to have, and then coming up with a title for those events and a synopsis for those events. Once you have those, the next thing you want to do is determine how many players you have and which player characters you want to make as pre-gens for that event. And then we go into the detailed description I gave about backstory and in this exciting issue. And then we build out our scenes. We play test the event. We take feedback from the play test, either from the people who did the play test or just your own personal experience from running the event. And then you're pretty much ready for the convention. Anything you want to do prior to the convention to really spruce up your game. If you want to make props, you can make props. If you want to have physical aids, you can have physical aids. If you want to make maps, you can make maps. Do all of that stuff prior to the convention, and I would make sure to be done with that stuff a week or two before the convention so you're not scrambling, getting ready for everything. And so you're not overwhelmed as you're coming into this experience. The next phase of convention gaming is the actual running the game itself. And there are some things to keep in mind as you are running a game at a convention for the first time. The first of which is that you are probably going to be playing with a lot of strangers. People who have not experienced you as a game master before, who may have not experienced the game system you're running, and who have their own foibles and characteristics, their own sort of quirks as you're sitting down with them to play. I advise you to get to the event like 30 minutes to an hour before it's supposed to start, so you can get set up your GM screen, get your props organized, make sure your character sheets are, in a nice stack. I would keep those character sheets behind your GM screen or in with your stack of stuff, and not just have them out on the table, because you could run into a situation where somebody sits down at the table and they just grab a character. And you want to make sure everybody has, well, it's up to you. I like to make sure everybody has an equal chance to play the character they want to play. But if you want to do it on a first come, first serve basis, you could also do that. I have found generally that providing a large number of interesting characters leads to an amicable character selection process. But you can run into situations where people both want to play the same character and they're not able to figure out who does what, and then it comes down to, I'd say, a dice roll or first come, first serve, however you want to, rock, paper, scissors, however you want to adjudicate that. Once everybody gets their characters, you make sure everybody is happy with their selections, and then you give your little bit of your spiel about how your system works and what to expect with your adventure. Do I ever size people up on the spot and choose certain characters for them? I try not to do that unless I have played with that person before and I know that they have a particular kind of character that they like to play. Or when we ran our Hades event at Origins this year, we had 22 players when it was, or 24 players, 23 players when it was all said and done. And not all of them knew what they wanted to play, and we didn't want to give an entire spiel about it. So we had a sign-up sheet at the front of the room that said, what kind of superheroes do you like? What is your favorite archetype? Is there anything you don't want to play? And we had people fill those out, and we did assign some characters based on looking at them and if they came together and sort of making educated guesses. But when it's a group of like 6 or less, I try to let people choose whatever they want to. I do have thoughts about who's going to play what, especially if I see familiar names on the sign-up list. But I try not to. I try not to assign anything without somebody asking me to. Unless they're like, I don't care, I'll play whoever. Then I'll look at the other characters who have been chosen to try to pick something that's helpful to the group while keeping with their vibe and seeing, like, okay, I think this person would like something easy or something difficult. Once everybody has their characters, you give your spiel about the system you're running, and if there's any pertinent information they need to know about the setting, like if you're running a DC game, you let them know, hey, you guys know that the multiverse exists as the Justice League, or you have encountered Darkseid before, or you've not encountered Darkseid before. Establish context for them, because the history of comic books is so vast and enormous. It's not, you don't want to say we're at the modern day comic book knowledge of these characters unless that's what you're at. Nate Robbins says, yeah, we had one convention, Jim, that basically everybody was random. We just had pre-generated characters, and you open the chest and you can either keep that character or pick different chests, but you couldn't switch back. That's cool. Yeah, I know Steve has done adventures where you make randomly generated characters before the adventure starts, and that's a lot of fun. He does that with icons very, very well. Icons is good for that. And then you begin running the game. It's up to you to keep things moving. It's up to you to keep things light and to make sure people are getting, attention, and you are reading the room with them, because you don't know these people, and you know that everybody comes to role-playing games to get something a little bit different out of it. There's actors, there's people who like the numbers and the combat, there's people who are just there to have a good time with their friends, there's people who maybe this is their first convention, or maybe this is their first role-playing game and they don't have a regular group at home. It's up to you as the GM to keep an eye on them and make sure people are having a good time. Feel the energy in the room, keep things moving, keep things light. It's also your job to enforce safety. So when they get to your table, make sure to let them know what your safety tools are. If you have X cards, explain the X cards. Basically, we like to use a red, yellow, green system for our games, where if you are signed up for our game, if you're having a good time, just leave it on green. If the content is veering into something you're uncomfortable with, go ahead and put a yellow card up. And then we'll sort of get out of that scene as quickly as possible and get less specific with the details. But if something is a hard stop, you'll put a red card down and we just stop that scene, recalibrate, and go on to the next scene. You might have different things in mind. I have a friend who has a Winnie the Pooh he puts up on the table, and if anybody has an issue, they'll just touch Winnie the Pooh and they'll move on, no questions asked. Jonesy asks about familiarity with the setting and rules. Yeah, do that during the pre-game session where you're explaining the system and when you're setting expectations for what your particular version of the story is going to take place in. But yeah, other than that, it's like running any game at home, except with strangers, and you have a time limit. So keep an eye on the energy, keep an eye on people's feelings and experiences. Make sure that you're able to adjudicate confrontation fairly. If people have, if there is something that's developing between two players that feels like it could be bad, just take a moment and address that. Make sure, hey, everybody's okay. We're just here to have fun. What's going on? Because at the end of the day, you are the host of this event with the convention, and the convention will come to you if there is a problem. You want to make sure that you can adjudicate things fairly, reasonably, and make sure to never escalate a situation if there is a situation that is uncomfortable. Escalation rarely leads to a happy resolution, so I always advise people to, let them wear themselves out and always keep your cool. Because at the end of the day, you're the professional there. You are the one who is volunteering your time to make sure people have a good convention. And the most important thing is to make sure you have fun for yourself. Because this is a lot of work you've put in. This is months before the convention that you've gone in. You have prepared, you have worried, you've made props, you've thought about all of this adventure, and you're providing it. You're the star of the show. You are there, you are having a good time, and your players will feel it when they know that you are having a good time, and that will make them have a better time. It's great. It's a great way to feed off of each other. Generally, when you're running events at a convention, people who sit down will have tickets for the event. It'll be your job in some capacity to collect those tickets and to make sure they make it to event headquarters. You'll want to make sure that you do that because some conventions keep track of how many seats that you filled in your event, and that determines if they ask you if they'll allow you to run events in the future. It also gives you an opportunity uh, to really interact with the volunteers at the convention to make sure that you establish a rapport with them and they know who you are, because you're all working together to make the convention the best it can possibly be. What questions do people have about running games at conventions now that we've sort of spoken at length about this topic? And I'm thinking about my Gen Con events. Let's just go take a look and see if they've been approved yet. Nope, still accepted for consideration. I hope this has been helpful for everyone. Did you mention how many materials you bring to run a game? Um, so it depends on the game that you're running. The bare minimum things that you should bring with you are, in my opinion, you should bring a game master screen. You should bring your own dice, maybe some dice extra in case people show up and don't know what dice your system calls for. I'd have at least a couple of sets for people who don't have dice. I always bring uh, paper for everyone, like spare loose leaf paper for people if they want to take notes. I'm a note taker personally as a player, and I don't know if that's helpful to people, but I'll bring paper, I'll bring pencils for everyone, um, and the pre-gen character sheets. Those are the bare minimum things that I advise bringing. Bringing role-playing books for your system can be helpful. It can also be distracting, so that's sort of up to you if you want to leave source books on the table for people to peruse, or if you want them just to have for yourself. That can be helpful. I do have these little laminated plastic sheets that give different kind of action types for Mutants and Masterminds. I like to make sure there's one for each half of the table. It came with the Game Master's Guide, so it's a cool little system. Um, and then and this again comes down, sometimes I procrastinate and I don't get everything done that I want to get done, but I like to have a little standee. I've got a little acrylic table stand. I like to have a cover image for the adventure that I'll Photoshop together, just so people, when they walk into the room, they know that that's the event I'm trying to be a part of. That's another thing about running games at a convention is you're very likely going to be in a room with 5 to 6 other tables that are happening at the same time. So make sure you're able to project and be heard, or if you're interested, or if you want to, you can buy like a little headset thing with a little speaker so that you can be heard a little easier. Just make sure you don't overdo it for your neighbors, and be polite and be courteous to the other GMs that are running events in the room, and they'll be courteous with you. Other things that I've brought in the past are maps. I'll do poster board maps, or I'll do. We had some scattered terrain that my brother 3D printed. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I appreciate you coming here and hanging out with us this evening. Sorry, Jonesy. Jonesy has also done most of the photoshopping for my table stands in recent years, but I used to do my own photoshopping. I haven't done that in a while, but I have a really awesome one for the Back in the USSR adventure that's just like Soviet propaganda and the Beatles and and Frank Gershwin. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, maps. If you want images of different NPCs that they're going to talk to, you could pin those to your GM screen when they're talking to them. You can do. We just had a blog post over at the Untold Stories project about how to do cardstock miniatures if you want to do something like that. It's sort of what level you want to go to with production. I found that going bigger can be better, but it can also be distracting and it can be stressful for GMs. So it's sort of your preference. Bare minimum, you want to have pre-gens, your screen, dice for you, and a couple dice extra for players, pencils and paper. That's the bare minimum I would suggest. Although table stands are always good too. Jonesy has a wonderful cheat sheet that has like Mutants and Masterminds adventure things, and then the character's name and an image of the character that people can sit in front of them. That helps keep them immersed and deal with some of the "we're all strangers" thing, because you can tell this is who's playing who easily. Yeah. Can people take this game home and play at home? Nate, you are very welcome to take X-Men Pariah home and play it at home. I can't bundle it up and give it to you because it's an X-Men adventure, and I can't put that on the Mutants Masterminds Patreon. But please feel free to go through the VOD and just type up whatever I came up with. Warden Maximus, any tips for writing catchy intros to get people to sign up? That is a science. I found the best way to write catchy intros is to keep them under 300 characters. So you don't want to do more than 2 or 3 sentences, because more information is generally not useful information. You want to keep things fast, pithy, and easy to wrap your mind around. I've also found that with catchy intros, you want to make sure you center who the player characters are, what the central conflict is, and who the antagonist is. Generally, those are the things that I most value. So mention the superhero team, what the central conflict is, and who's trying to stop them, and keep it short. And also keep it an active voice. So make sure the heroes are the ones driving the action. It's not something is happening to the heroes. It's the heroes are doing something to stop something that's happening. Drive them as the vehicle and keep it short, keep it simple around those 3 subjects, and don't introduce more exposition than you need. How long do you prep your games to last? It depends on the game. I suggest the similar but legally distinct Alex Men to easily package the adventure of a presentation on the Patreon. Maybe I can do that, Professor Purge. I've got to finish the Gamma, the Atom Smasher, and Atlantis adventure for you guys for tomorrow's Patreon update. But maybe I can package the Alex Men off to face Pariah as a fun Patreon reward. But Learn Music asked, how long do I prep my games to last? Most games, I try not to prep more than 16 to 20 hours. I try to do for every hour of adventure that I'm running, I try to do 3 to 4 hours of prep time when I make time to do the prep work. I've practiced running convention games for a long time now, and I've run a lot of games. I've dealt with a lot of players, and I've gotten to the point where I can I don't have to do quite as much preparation work. I definitely work on the synopsis, the title, and the player characters. That's sort of the bare minimum that I have to get done in order to consider an adventure ready for me. Like if I have a strong synopsis, if I have my pre-gens ready, and I have a good title, I can run the adventure at that point. In fact, at Origins, I ran several adventures that were I had the synopsis ready, and then I improvised the entire adventure on the spot. I wouldn't recommend doing that until you've gotten a lot of practice in. Because again, you want to put your best foot forward. You want to value the people's time who have shown up. But I have been running adventures at conventions now for 11 years, since 2012. And I'm a professional RPG developer. This is my job. I think about this stuff all the time, and I am fully immersed in Mutants and Masterminds and able to sort of tell stories and basically deal with the consequences of player actions very quickly. You'll get to that point with enough practice, but for your first few outings, I would suggest doing a decent amount of preparation work so that you don't have to dedicate any any of your internal memory to generating content as you're going. Like, I can do it, but I hate laying rails right in front of the train that is following me. um, and again, I don't know if all of you were here earlier, but I did share a link in chat earlier that leads to my backlog of adventures that I've written and run over the years, at least dating back to 2015. I wasn't able to find any itineraries from before that, but I'll share that link here in chat again. If there are any adventures that you think sound fun and you want to run, please feel free to take those adventures and run them yourselves. And if anybody needs stat blocks for general Mutants and Masterminds characters like DC characters or Marvel characters, I'm always happy to share those files if you just email me at alex@greenronin.com. Jonesy recommends using something physical for hero points. That is another great thing to add in. If you do, poker chips are great. Glass beads are great. M&Ms are also awesome if there's a sanitary place to put them in the middle so people can grab them, because it will encourage them to use them because they get to eat the M&Ms after they use them. That's another little bit of advice I give people about hero points at convention games is there's no prize at the end for having the most. Please feel free to use them. And as a GM for M&M, you want to make sure you are passing out hero points at a decent clip. I like to give out one at the end of each scene, and I really like to give out at least an extra one to each player during scenes. I'll look for something funny or a good description or anything that really to get those points moving, because one of the key currencies in M&M is the hero point. That is a big point. That is a big part of the power dynamic between the GM and the player. Look for places that their complications can come in. Look for ways that your villains can do an extra thing and give a hero point to a character. You want those points to be moving because they encourage bigger and better narrative stories. There's one other thing that I need to do tonight. I do read your guys' comments on the videos. Somebody, I got to double check who. Greg Banks asked me if I could give some help with the rank table in Mutants and Masterminds. Yeah, it is it can be a complicated table when you're first looking at it. This is the table in the Deluxe Heroes Handbook that covers things like like mass, time, distance, and volume, and sort of the equations related to them. So just looking at it, it does move exponentially. From every rank up is basically twice as much as the previous rank, and then you look into the different equations to come up with things. So if you're looking at distance and time, sorry, I'm collecting my thoughts about this because I want to make sure I help Greg out very much. So each of these ranks on here represents a range of measures. Time rank 4 is actually all measures between 1 and 2 minutes. So that's not the cutoff. It's anything that's in that is in that rank. Measures can have negative ranks. And we don't directly add ranks. So when you're putting rank 4 together and rank 6 distance, that's not rank 10. Rank 4 is 500 feet. Rank 6 is 1,800 feet. So you get 2,300 feet, which is... that would only be rank 7. So, it's not quite 4 and 6 is 10. It's 4 and 6 together is pretty much equal to 7, oddly enough. And it just takes a lot of practice. There's a lot of time that you have to get in there, and these numbers relate to each other. Greg, if you have specific questions about how the ranks work, please let me know. But if you want to, I don't think we can do a whole episode dedicated to the rank chart because it's a little dry and it's a little mathematical, and that's not 100% my expertise. But generally, your speed rank is equal to, basically in one round, your speed rank is equal to how far you can move in one round. So if you have speed 20, you can move 4,000 miles in 6 seconds, which 6 seconds is one round. So that's a good way to sort of figure those numbers out. If you're looking at what you can do in a given round, it's always going to be time rank 0. So whatever that number is plus 0 is what you're going to wind up with. So whatever that number is, basically. But yeah, if you have more specific questions, Greg, please let me know. Professor Purge, it might be useful for the GM to announce conditions for earning extra hero points prior to the start of gameplay. Yes, I like to include. So I'll hold up a poker chip and I'll say, this is a hero point. You can use hero points to reroll dice if you're not satisfied with one of your rolls. You can also use them to do what's called edit the scene. So you can include something that the GM didn't explicitly describe in the scene. That could be something like we're fighting poison ivy in a greenhouse. You could throw a hero point down and say, look, the gardener left some herbicide out. Or I'm getting attacked by a shark and I'm attached to a helicopter. Here's a hero point. I've got my bat shark repellent up in the helicopter. Let me go get that real quick. You can also use hero points to do what's called a power stunt, which allows you to use your powers in a way to create an effect that's not listed on your sheet, if it makes sense. So I've got a utility belt. I reach in and I grab a new gadget. I've got a new magic spell I want to use. I've got a fun trick arrow that Bowman wants to grab out and then fire off something, things like that. There are other uses for hero points that are included on the sheets around the table. But the way you earn hero points is through good role playing, vivid descriptions, jokes I think are funny, jokes I think aren't funny, and suffering setbacks just like superheroes and other media. Also, if you see something that looked hero point worthy and I missed it, please feel free to shout it out because I'll probably give them a hero point. That way, players are encouraged to also be thinking of what are the cool ways to get hero points? What are interesting things my fellow players are doing? Because you want to make sure everybody's together. Jonesy wants to check out my Blue Rose adventure. I would be happy to send that over to you, Jonesy. It was not a great adventure, as I recall, but it was fun. They had to go into Kern, and they had to navigate some treacherous mountains. They had to deal with some Crimson Guard. They had to rescue a Vadashah boy before he was taken off to evil wizard school, and they had to sneak back into Aldous. It was okay. I didn't have the best table for that adventure, but it was a fun adventure. Does anyone else have any other questions about convention stuff before we start getting out of here for the night? It is 9:55 in my time, so it's time to start winding down. And is there a topic that you all want to discuss next time we get together? I have one in mind. Andrea Cavalli requested advice about preparing and running adventures for a single player. Is that something people would be interested in if we're looking for a 1 GM, 1 player situation? Or do you want me to speak more at length about challenge scenes or role-playing scenes or investigation scenes? Are there specific topics in mind that you want questions about? How to deal with problem powers, setting up interesting skill challenges? We can definitely add that to the list. I should probably... We're just going to make a list of topics real quick. JOG topics. So, 1 player, 1 GM came up. Challenge scenes. Boy, I can't spell. Challenge scenes. Roleplay scenes. And I'm here to help demystify anything about game mastering. It doesn't have to specifically be about Mutants and Masterminds. I just want to help empower you all to become the best game masters that you can be. Because at the end of the day, game mastering is something that needs to be done in our industry to make games happen. And it's not as difficult as the old tomes would lead you to believe. Anybody can game master. And I think everybody should try it at least once. But I am here to help demystify, to help answer questions, to help anything you need when you're preparing to become a game master, either for the first time or for the 1,000th time. adjusting for different size groups. We can definitely talk about. I tend to think of that as malleable adventure design. So creating adventures that can be for multiple power levels, multiple amounts of players. That could probably be strung into our single player topic next time. Running dynamic duos, hero and sidekick adventures. It sounds like maybe we should just have one big session about um, running games for less than a superhero team. So that could be single player, that could be two player, that can be. I'd have to really think about solo play, but I know that's something that is big in the industry right now. So we'll definitely get some thoughts together about that. How about free range versus railroad and how to keep players engaged and thinking? No, that is a very good topic, Squire. That's not too vague. And I think you'll find that I have some controversial opinions about railroading. Player engagement, I think, is a little bit separate from free range versus railroad. And some of these, they might not be a full 2 hour discussion. They could be two small discussions. It can be a smaller form video that I record. This content is here for you all. So whatever is helpful for you, I am here to assist. Solo play is fascinating. Um, I'm very interested to how it would work for Eminem. Because we've been asked about it a couple of times now from a design point of view. People are interested in solo play. I think single, like 1v1 or 1 and 1, is a lot easier to wrap my head around than solo play, but I would be happy to think about some optional rules for Eminem that can facilitate solo play. But yeah, we have some good discussions here. We have a couple of topics, at least for the next short little while. Yeah, not railroading, illusion of choice. That is sort of that's the root of my opinion about railroading versus free range. Is I think of GMing more as the cup game, where the ball is really wherever you want it to be, but the players are sort of watching the ball and figuring out which one they want to pick. Narration style and tone. What do you mean by narration style and tone? I do understand the epic fantasy versus superheroes versus fairy tales versus sci-fi. We'll call that superhero genre breakdown, maybe. But I'm always happy if you're looking for general narration advice. I'd be very happy to come up with topics about how to narrate adventures, how to do flavor text, how to do in character role playing. Sort of any time that you're speaking to the players as a mouthpiece for the story, if that's what you mean by narration style. How do you go about conveying the mood you want your players to imagine? Yeah, I think that all sort of falls into. I'll write down specifically how player mood. Perfect. Cool. Well, I think without further ado, let's go ahead and start wrapping things up. Um, as far as news around Green Ronin, we will be back on Monday with some M&M Monday. I'm not 100%. I don't remember exactly what we're chatting about, but Steve and I will have some fun discussions to have, I'm sure. Um, Thursday, we always have Thursday, and then our Joy of Game Mastering should be live again on July 25th. That's our next time to get together. We try to do the Joy of Game Mastering every other Tuesday, just so I have time to prepare for the prompts and to give a decent conversation since I'm here by myself. And that'll be the week before Gen Con. So we will talk about, I think we will jump into, we'll go ahead and talk about one player and one GM. or running the game for less than the team on the 25th. And that'll sort of incorporate malleable adventure design, 1 player, 1 GM, running games for less than 4 players, all that fun stuff. As for me, I will be at Gen Con in a couple of weeks. My adventure should be approved very soon. So if you are going to be at Gen Con, please feel free to sign up for my events. I'd love to play with any of you at the table. I will be running Back in the USSR, a story in which the Beatles are protected by the Suicide Squad during the first tour of the Soviet Union. I'll be running a Superman for All Seasons, in which a group of paragons from across the multiverse team up to stop a coalition of evil supermen. I will also be running Freedom League Into the Idiot Box, in which a group of superheroes are pulled into TV land and have to deal with a constantly rotating channel and trying to find their way back to the real world outside of primetime. And we will be doing Titan City Chronicles, The Dragon of Parkhurst Manor, in which some magical superhero kids find a dragon that is being smuggled and have to reunite it with its long-lost mother. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Jonesy, I'm looking forward to seeing you again as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you do want to catch up with me outside of this, you can find me over at the Untold Stories Project every Wednesday night, where I'm the GM for our Freedom Be Dark in the Multiverse of the Master Mage campaign. So again, if you have any questions, if you have any requests, please go ahead and send me an email at alex@greenronin.com. I'd be very happy to answer anything if you have topic suggestions, if you have further questions about our topic. Yeah, I'm sorry, Eric. I wish we had time to play together too. We're gonna have to get you to come on to one of our streams sometime, Eric, so you can come up and play. That'd be a lot of fun. And but yeah, without further ado, thank you again, everybody who hung out with me tonight. Please make sure to find some time to play a game for yourself and continue to be good people. We will see you next time on The Joy to Game Mastering. The Joy of Game Mastering. I'm so bad at this. We'll see you next time.